While Admiral Ackbar originated as a relatively minor character in Return of the Jedi, over the years he became a big part of the New Republic's leadership in novels set after the Battle of Endor, following up his position as Supreme Commander within the Rebellion by leading many of the campaigns against the remaining warlord forces of the Galactic Empire. Most of these stories came out in the 90s and took place over the first 10 to 15 years after the Battle of Endor. Following the Pelion and Gavrisum Treaty, where the New Republic made peace with the Empire, Ackbar mostly went into retirement, although he came out to help in crises like the fight with the Second Imperium. This is less because the books originally intended it to be a return to duty for him, and more because of inconsistent ideas about when he might have left active duty, because stories tended to not be all that tied together at the time. But as source books started tying these elements together and the idea of a more cohesive expanded universe solidified, the idea of a semi-retirement by this point of about 20 ABY or years after the Battle of Yavin was pretty consistent. One of the biggest shifts in this happened as the license transferred from Bantam to Del Rey for Star Wars publishing, and they began a 19-book series called the New Jedi Order series, which brought together some new authors as well as some of the bigger authors from the Bantam period. This series told the story of the Yuuzhan Vong War, beginning in 25 ABY, or 25 years after the Battle of Yavin, where Ackbar had been fully retired for about 2 years, having been pushed entirely out of public life by a political rival, Bors Phalia, a Bothan who had become chief of state after making a failed political play a decade and a half earlier in the Thrawn trilogy. Ackbar was succeeded in his position as New Republic Supreme Commander by Cien Sov, a Celestian who was seen as an adequate caretaker and administrator of a peacetime navy, but lacked Ackbar's tactical or strategic brilliance, and the lack of a skilled, experienced strategist like Ackbar at the overall helm of the faction was a big contributing factor in the series of crushing defeats experienced by the New Republic as the Yuuzhan Vong, the extragalactic invaders, pushed their way through the outer and mid-rims almost without response. This wasn't entirely on Sov, as much of the political leadership was just unwilling to act, but part of that can be laid at Sov's feet for not advocating more for a unified response. Early defensive efforts against the Yuuzhan Vong tended to have to be led either locally or with the help of kind of maverick admirals within the New Republic Defense Force like Trace Crefay and Garm Bal Iblis, with some of these admirals even having a temporary alliance with Imperial leader Gilad Pelion for the defense of Ethor. Cien Sov's inadequacy compared to Ackbar was mentioned pretty consistently in the series, and it was a factor Sov himself was aware of, heading into and especially after the capture of Coruscant by the Yuuzhan Vong. Ackbar, however, as a Mon Calamari who had literally been a fish out of water for most of his adult life, was in increasingly poor health. Despite the wish, including from Cien Sov himself, that Ackbar would be able to help coordinate the New Republic forces, his health prevented it. In some ways, the fall of Coruscant proved to be a very, very incredibly dark cloud with a silver lining. The government reconvened on Mon Calamari, Ackbar's home planet, and in the novel Destiny's Way, this allowed Ackbar to meet more actively with some of the remaining members of the fractured New Republic military and government, including Cien Sov, who would have happily stepped aside if Ackbar had been up for taking over the full mantle of Supreme Commander. Despite the new work-from-home policy that Ackbar would have been able to enjoy, he was still too unwell to take a particularly active role. From his pool and through consultation with people who had been more directly engaged with the Yuuzhan Vong, Ackbar did lay out a plan which the New Republic could use to turn around the war, bringing the beleaguered government back to its rebel roots. He insisted first of all that only the most critical points could be defended, the world's most responsible for producing new warships being Mon Calamari, Kuat, and Corellia. Absolutely nothing else could have a significant defense, including refugee convoys which had been raided by the Yuuzhan Vong. This would ensure those major planets could cost more to take than the Yuuzhan Vong could afford to spare, while the New Republic's forces would not be spread as thin as they had been at the start. The second part of this was 3 months of skirmishes to train new recruits. All commanders were instructed to avoid any major confrontations, in favor of using their own discretion to pick lopsided fights where they would win and win big, granting experience points until their crews could level up and take an extra perk. This would allow them to take advantage of just how much the Yuuzhan Vong had spread themselves thin at this point. As this plan was being rolled out, the simple message of Ackbar is back was broadcast throughout the New Republic fleet to massive celebration, with every crew promising that they would like this video and subscribe for more videos. The key to turning this slow growth of ships and experienced soldiers into a winning position for the New Republic came with taking advantage of information about the Yuuzhan Vong brought by Jacen Solo, the son of Han and Leia, who'd been held captive by the Yuuzhan Vong for months. Knowing that the Yuuzhan Vong had lost about a third of their initial forces and that they needed to strike a winning blow themselves, knowing the Vong would commit to any attack long beyond when the losses made it worthwhile, and knowing the right target, specifically a political leader being guarded by Jedi twins, given the importance of twins within the Yuuzhan Vong religion and their hatred of the Jedi, the New Republic started putting out false leads that their new chief of state, Cal Omas, was hiding in a redoubt deep in the core, protected by Jaina and Jacen Solo, the Jedi twins who were kids of another person in a pair of Jedi twins, Leia. This lured the Yuuzhan Vong in, and the Battle of Ebaq 9 destroyed 5 massive Yuuzhan Vong battle groups, including the death of Supreme Commander Savong Law, the leader of the overall Yuuzhan Vong military. But there was something Ackbar hadn't considered. When the battle started turning against the Yuuzhan Vong, Savong Law began a suicide charge at the planet, attempting to kill the personnel on the planet, particularly Jaina Solo. This led to nearly 10,000 warriors being sent down to the surface, killing many of the forces trying to defend the planet above it, and nearly killing Jaina as well. To be honest, Destiny's Way is a little bit weird about the losses in this section. The part where the Yuuzhan Vong are heading to the planet happens pretty quickly, and we know that the deaths include about half of the Smugglers Alliance, a group of somewhat established characters overall, and they were in a battle group that was under Han's command for the battle. But we never really hear of anyone specific dying in the battle, so it ends up feeling a little bit sanitized and distant when you are reading it. Savong Law said that any Jedi who wanted to participate in his Jedi hunt would be allowed to the surface, so Jacen went down hoping to protect Jaina, and then another Jedi who had helped keep Jacen captive in the Yuuzhan Vong, Verger, who had then turned into his mentor, solved the problem by depressurizing the parts of the Ebaq 9 facility the Yuuzhan Vong were in by crashing an A-Wing into it, sacrificing herself to protect Jacen and Jaina, and basically taking out the entire Yuuzhan Vong army. Despite what otherwise seemed like a massive victory through Ackbar's work, an equally large toll was taken on the Admiral himself. He was essentially despondent after the battle. His skin was described as having grayed and his words were slurred as he beat himself up over not foreseeing the attempt to occupy the planet. As other officers celebrated the victory, which basically turned the war in the New Republic's favor for the first time, Ackbar's assistant Winter escorted him home alongside Mara Jade. And the sad part to me is that this moment of essentially despair is the last moment we see of Ackbar and the last we ever really hear of him, at least while he's alive. It seems like he never recovered from this situation, and we at least don't hear any more about him helping to coordinate or consult with other New Republic leaders. The next time we hear of anything actually happening with him comes several books later in the series finale, the Unifying Force, set sometime longer than 3 months but probably shorter than a year later. And this mention is when the characters in that book learn that Ackbar had died, with a memorial being held after the war, which ended shortly following his death. In some ways, this strikes me as potentially being a nod to FDR, President of the United States throughout World War II, who died similarly shortly before the end of the war in the European theater, and who similarly had some end-of-war celebrations dedicated to him. Ackbar does remain a big symbol in the books that come afterwards for the members of the Galactic Alliance, which is what the New Republic was turned into. He doesn't quite get to the point of having a ship class named after him like Gilad Pellaeon does, but he does have a specific ship, a Victory-class Star Destroyer, named after him. His Legend's death has always kind of struck me as sad, though, having faded into the background, clearly at an emotional low in his final appearance, even if we didn't know it was his final appearance at the time. It was actually over a year of real-world time between his last appearance in Destiny's Way and his death in the Unifying Force, with one coming out in October of 2002 and Unifying Force coming out in November of 2003. That's going to do it for today, though. Everyone leave your favorite Admiral Ackbar memory and Sarah McLachlan lyric in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.